We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone for attending tonight. I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order for July 6, 2021. We will start with our Pledge of Allegiance. And Toby, would you please lead us tonight? Thank you, Toby. We'll start with communications from the public tonight. If you are here to speak on one of the 4 public hearings that we have advertised, please wait until I call that individual public hearing, which will probably come up here pretty quickly. But if there's anything else you'd like to bring, if there's anything else you'd like to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity, your name and address for the record. Please, Ed.
Ed Doctor, 2279 Cedar Lane, 845 Wisconsin, Tap House. I just would like to get the conversation started about not affordable housing, employee housing. If you ask my opinion, what COVID did to us, as a community, business owners, we're making a lot of money. We've never been this busy. We have, tens of thousands of people coming here that it's hard to get a cheeseburger on a Monday in this town, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday. They're waiting forever. We're not getting any applications at the Tap House. We've gotten 2 all spring, normally 30 or 40. I don't think it's the unemployment. I just think there's nowhere to live. So I've been looking into Aspen, Jackson, Truckee, these towns that have actually, the city, some of them are public-private partnerships, which I don't think would be a bad idea. I'm willing to get business owners and go it alone, but with the money that you're receiving for COVID relief, I think it'd be great if that could go towards, I understand the city doesn't want to purchase land or it's not normal, but the city does own land, and I think we kind of got to think out of the box on this one, or our restaurants aren't going to be open full-time ever again. There's just nowhere to live in this valley, and there is land out there, there is money. I've talked to an awful lot of business leaders. They all think it's a great idea, and I got to go back to work, but I just want to get that conversation started. And I got a lot of people I've talked to are, they're totally down with the idea. It's obviously not super easy to do, but it is doable. I've got some answers from people in Jackson too about how they did it, and their housing is about 15 miles south of town. They just bought land and they did it, and I believe it's public-private. They've got businesses lease the spaces for their employees, and it's up to them kind of thing. But swear to God, it can be done, and I'll be willing to do anything to help make it happen. Even though I got a full staff, we're open 7 days a week, Montana Tap House.
Thanks, Ed.
Toby Scott, 1478 Barclay Lane in Whitefish. And my delivery here might be a little bit slow. I sort of wrote up what I wanted to say to make sure that I was eloquent about it. But for those in the public and others that don't have a copy, this is regarding Ed's affordable housing idea. And with the onset of summer and the tourist season, I have experienced the shortage of service workers over the past several weeks. Restaurants are closed for lack of employees. Other establishments are running limited days and hours. I'm sure the City Council and members of the public here have seen this too. Workers have left to other places in the country where they can afford to live and work in similar employment situations. Housing in Whitefish and even the surrounding area is too expensive for service workers. Now, I believe the city has a windfall of money under the COVID-19 relief plan, and you're wondering what to do with it. Affordable housing should be at the top of the list. The volunteer affordable housing plan did not work over the past 25 years, I believe with the exception of one apartment building. And the mandatory plan has been eliminated by the governor. It's disappointing, but we can move forward. I propose that a portion, if not all of this COVID relief money, go toward establishing affordable housing in Whitefish. This housing plan should begin with the purchase of land by the city and development of the property by putting in utility services and then housing in the form of modular or other type of inexpensive living space, to be later supplemented and replaced by studio and one-bedroom apartments. The city, working in concert with service industry employers, will create a qualification criteria for potential renters and a term rental plan that will allow them to have a place to live while working at these lower paying service jobs. My request tonight is that the City Council appoint a committee to start this process and report back with recommendations for the council to review. Members of this committee should be made up of retail and restaurant industry employers, preferably having at least 10 employees, the banking community, a member of the City Council and the Housing Authority, along with citizens interested in promoting this development. They should be given a directive to present a city-owned and run housing plan that will be financed and owned by the city in partnership with the employers. The employers cannot do this alone. The need is too great. If the city of Whitefish has enough money to reconstruct a perfectly decent Edgewood road that shows limited deterioration, it should be able to help finance what could be the future of our tourist-driven businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Appreciate the letter as well, which we received today. Thank you. Who's next? Sir. First come, first serve.
Jim Welsh, property owner, 271 Vista. Not a resident here anymore, but I just would like to visit with the council for a bit. Top of my list was an affordable place for workers here to live. I was not an advocate of that 35 years ago because our town, our business operated on railroad workers, loggers, school teachers, pretty much in that order. That's who we catered to. And now it's not that anymore. 25 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce had a speaker come to town, and he told us that pretty soon your town's not going to have a grocery store and a barber shop and an insurance man, and it's not going to have that. It's not that town. It's a resort town now, full-on resort town. It has its own unique set of problems like other resort towns do, and a place for these people to live and not get shoved out and to equalize the playing field. Yeah, the resort tax was for helping the resort, and that's what we are, or you are. I feel a little out of place speaking because I'm not living here now, but the resort tax has been near and dear to my heart, and there's some folks that know how hard we worked on it to make it happen. There is money there. I'm, looking at where you're allocating or suggesting the allocation go.
I don't mean to interrupt you, sir, but if you are here to speak on that resolution, if you don't mind waiting for the public hearing.
Okay, I'll.
With all due respect, sorry.
I just didn't know if this was time to do it. Everybody else, I was just enthused.
Very much appreciate your comments, but if you don't mind, we'll probably get to that item here in the next half hour or so if we're lucky.
Didn't know I used up my
You can have 3 more. Thanks, Jim. Who's next?
Hi, my name is David Martin. I live at 816 Texas Avenue. Wasn't sure exactly how to start this. I'll probably write you all an email to follow up, but I wanted to start it out at least in person. I want to tell you about an event, and I want to tell you the results of a little research I did. Saturday, June 26th, I'm sitting on my back porch on Texas Avenue having dinner with 2 out-of-town guests. At 8 o'clock, the music at the tap house started. This happens from time to time. In the past, it has not been egregious. The music kept getting louder and louder as the evening wore on. I called twice. No, someone in my party called twice. Then they stopped answering the phone. Turns out that the woman who was visiting is an engineer, and she had a dB meter on her phone. It's not NIST, but it's good enough for her. Measured the decibel level at our house. Paying attention? Write this down. Numbers to follow. 76.6 dB at our house. I was getting pretty mad by this time. That was 8:50 at our house. So I went up. I said I'll be right back to my guests. I went up to the bandstand with her dB meter, and at 9 o'clock in the parking area next door, not even at the bandstand, which is outside, by the way. I measured the dBs at 95.4. I called the police, made a noise complaint. Officer Bowl called me back later. He's badge number W11. By the way, courteous and professional. I salute him. He told me there's no Whitefish noise ordinance until 10 p.m. He agreed it was very high for his residential zone. He thought there was a Flathead County ordinance, and I hung on to the phone for a little while he researched it. And then he said, you know, I need to go research this some more, and I'll take it to my supervisor for more. I said, that's fine. I'm going to come to the city council and talk to them as well. So my research, I can't find a Flathead County ordinance about noise, but while I was looking, I did find one in Billings. Get this, so residential, commercial, day and night. 4 numbers I'm about to give you. Day for them is from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. for the perspective of noise. Residential limit, this is max permissible, not average, max permissible. Residential day, 65 dB. Residential night, 55 dB. Commercial area, max permissible. Day between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., 80 dB, and at night, commercial, 60 dB. That measures against the measurement that I took, 95.4. That's 15 dB above what is allowed in Billings in a commercial area during the day. That's the highest number of the 4 that I just read you was 80 dB. Their noise level at the tap house at 9 p.m. I have a picture of it on my phone if you want to see it. When I send you the email, I'll send you a picture. At 9 p.m., it was 95.4. I don't know if you know about dB, but for every 3 dB, it's twice the noise power, basically. So if you go up 15 dB, this is 15 dB above the max billing, that's 32 times the noise level. You double it, double that, double that, double that, you're up to 32 times the noise level permissible. Now, I am not a fan of lots of regulations. I really am not. But I think Whitefish Police need to have something in their back pocket that they can do when a business is running roughshod over the residential community that's adjacent. I think you should be able to do something about it. And right now, you can do nothing. Anybody can pull up to the curb at the farmer's market or at the park, you know, in an official spot and turn up the music that he's got running from a generator in the back of his truck. Nothing can stop it right now, according to this. And I think this is really egregious. I will follow this up with an email to you, and if there's something else I can do other than file this with you, do more research, what have you, I would be glad to do it.
Thanks, David.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
Excuse me, Toby Scott, just to address his complaint. I am familiar with sound. I'm talking to you at 72 dB right now. So,
Thanks, Toby. Who's next? Further comment from the public? We'll go ahead and move on. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any. How about the council? None from the council. We'll move on to our consent agenda. You have the minutes from the June 21st, 2021 regular session. Can I have a motion for approval unless there are any corrections or additions? Rebecca.
Yep, there's 2 corrections that Michelle already has, but page 15, under section 6, it should read in the public, not I public. And on page 21, the amount that we discussed as a penalty for people that are cheating short-term rentals was $500, not $550, correct? Okay, that's all. Otherwise, I move to approve the minutes with corrections.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries unanimously. We will move on to our first public hearing of the evening, which is item 6A on the agenda, which is a consideration of a request from Wolf Auto Group for a conditional use permit to operate a car dealership located at 6331 Highway 93 South, the property is zone WB2, which is our secondary business district. This is the former DePrado location, and this will be WCUP 21-10. Good evening.
All right. Good evening, Tara Ossendorf, Planner 2. This is a request from Phil Wolf with Wolf Auto for a CUP to operate an auto sales and service business at 6331 Highway 93 South. It would be the same use as had previously occupied the property, and they will be utilizing the existing building and parking there on site. So no new changes, no new development, just the use. It's zone WB2 secondary business, so a conditional use permit's required for automotive sales in this zone. The properties to the south and west are also zone WB2. The property just north is county property, zoned B4, and then to the east is the residential PUD of Riverwood Park. The growth policy designation for this site is also general commercial, which responds to the requested use. The lot will be accessed from the existing access on Highway 93 South, and we've heard from MDT that that remains an acceptable access. It also works for all emergency services and shouldn't negatively impact traffic. No signage has been proposed. The existing building complies with all setback, height, and lot coverage requirements. Any on-site lighting used must be dark sky compliant. Since there's no new building or other development as part of this request, we usually wouldn't require any additional landscaping be added to the site. However, given some comments from members of the public and then some discussion amongst the planning board members, there's been a recommended condition added by the planning board in order to require the applicant to add landscaping to the east side of the lot, kind of where the residential area is there, Riverwood Park, just to keep kind of that use screened from the residential. And that's condition number 7 in your city council staff report. There were a number of other public comments, both in writing and in person, at the recent public hearing, which can be found in your packets. No concerns that were brought up were necessarily with the use, given that the site had been previously functioning under the same use for a number of years. That was the Volkswagen dealership there on Highway 93. But the comments were rather with regard to lighting, access to the site, buffering from adjacent residential uses, and then landscaping. All of those were addressed by the planning board in their discussion. One thing to note about the planning board's discussion and the additional landscaping condition is that if the lot is ever subdivided, there will also be additional opportunity to require other landscaping, which I know has been a discussion, but we have nothing actually in the works yet, nothing submitted. And then in addition, it would also help to make sure folks aren't using an unapproved vehicular access at the northeast corner of the property, which currently has a curb, but people continue to kind of drive over. So there's been some general safety concerns there. I'll also note that there's a second condition regarding landscaping, which will require that the applicant improve and maintain the existing on-site landscaping, just since it's been vacant for a little bit, and there's obviously some upkeep that kind of needs to start happening on site. And so in summary, the CUP is simply requesting the use of the site for auto sales and service. The staff and planning board recommendation is for approval of WCUP 2110. And that would be subject to the updated 10 conditions of approval listed in the most recent staff report. So also just note that the transmittal letter, I don't believe, has the updated language, so make sure to take a look at the actual city council staff report for that condition number 7. With that, the applicant sent a representative to tonight's meeting, and I believe he's on WebEx as well, but at this time I can take any questions for staff.
Thanks, Tara. Any questions for Tara?
I
Steve.
do have a question. So the condition number 7 that I'm reading says sufficient landscaping must be added. Mm-hmm. There's no definition of sufficient landscaping in our zoning regulations, is there? Mm-hmm. I mean, what can we make it more official so that we can say, so that there's like we have some objective measurement?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's a recommendation, we can definitely look into changing that.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have one or if
I don't, but in this, if this were a normal CUP in this zone, what would be the requirement for landscaping?
I might refer to Dave on that one, just since I haven't been around as long. Is there anything that we've used in the past, Dave?
Do you mind using the microphone, Dave? Or even Craig's if you would like.
Yeah, in the B2 on the, like a rear setback, there's a 20-foot setback when it's adjacent to, or 20-foot buffer requirement, landscape buffer when it's adjacent to residential. So we, could make it that.
Anything further, Steve?
No, that's it, thanks.
Ben, question?
Yeah, the development standards that we have down in the B2 district are not a part of this review, correct? Because this is not a development project?
Correct, and that was not originally a condition of approval, but planning board, hearing some of the public comments, thought that they wanted to add that condition of approval for the site.
Okay. If the applicant down the road decides to do a subdivision or other development process, would they then have to bring the site up to the development standards that we have in place?
If they were to move forward and do new development on the site, they would.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Rebecca, did you have a question?
Is that on? Yeah. I went and toured the site today, and one of the workers was there, a really nice guy. He mentioned that there was a potential subdivision on the east side, and then they were only going to use part of the parking lot for the car dealership, and then there was a plan for commercial development next to Wright's Furniture. And I'm just wondering why all of that wasn't brought in at the same time so that we could look at traffic and the way that it would work within the neighborhood. And so could you address that, please?
I can let you know what my understanding is, and then I'm sure that the applicant can fill in as well. But from what I've heard, the subdivision just isn't quite ready. They've obviously been in discussion about it, but kind of want to get the dealership up and running at this time before they move forward with the subdivision. But they can fill in if they have any additional information on that one.
And the commercial use?
As far as the subdivision goes,
It's more that there will be 3 uses on this property when it's built out. And so we had a kind of a similar project across the street that it seemed like it was 3 different uses on that side too, and it got turned down. But sometimes when you have lots of uses, it can create a lot of transportation issues. And so anyways, I know tonight we're only dealing with the car dealership, but I like to look at things as a whole when we're approving things, because sometime later we might have unintended consequences. So there might be a potential commercial use on this site as well.
correct, potential, but I don't have that information at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further questions for Tara? Thank you, Tara. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6A of our agenda, and I'm not sure if we have Tom or Bert or both present. They're the applicants on this project, but I'll turn it over to Michelle to coordinate the remote public comment, please.
So through the WebEx, if you would like to speak, go ahead and unmute your mic and you can go ahead. Oh, can you? Okay.
Oh.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Welcome.
So I'm Brad Wolf. I'm real familiar, of course. My wife Jennifer and I and my daughter Tori do operate a dealership in Jackson, Wyoming currently. We're real familiar with, resort towns, what we go through with housing. All the stuff that you guys were talking about earlier, we really relate to because we've been living it for the last 16 years in the community we run a business. So to address your question, Mrs. Norton, that is, we're talking about some future things. Our biggest concern, of course, this building sat vacant for the last 4 years. When properties sit, they deteriorate. And, as you can tell, even in the last couple of weeks, if you've had a chance to drive by, property's now mowed, sprinklers are back on, grass is greening up. My wife and daughter were out there planting flowers yesterday in the flower beds, mulch is out. We care about properties. We care about people. We're excited, first of all, to, get started in the area. We have a really good service and product we offer. We're almost a 5-star rated dealership everywhere we are. And so we're going to offer an excellent customer experience and just really cater to community with local folks. But we have to be able to get income generated, of course, on a property and making a mortgage payment on, of course, to be able to do anything in the future. We've talked about some things, and of course, we'll hit all the guidelines that you guys request of us if we choose to develop further. But we want to, get going and make the property look like it should. And vacant buildings just, they hurt a community, I believe. So.
Great, thank you. Anything else to add to the staff report before we go to a public hearing?
No.
And you, just one more time, your name and address, just for.
Brad Wolf, and our Whitefish address is a 6331 US Highway 93. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, Steve, we might have a question here.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. It's fine. I just wonder, would you be opposed to a 20-foot setback on the back, on the east side of that property where it abuts the residential zone with landscaping?
I don't know that we'd be opposed. The one concern I have is with what it's like to try to get work done, in town currently. If that was proposed, we'd obviously like the opportunity to be able to bond for it and move forward at a future date as we can get the work done. Obviously we've got, a larger setback than that on the front side and fully landscaped already. So I think we hit the other guidelines as far as what's required currently. But I guess we'd be open, provided it's something we could bond for and get moving on.
And if we leave it at sufficient landscaping on that side, what does that mean to you?
As far as in current state?
Well, right now, the condition of approval is sufficient landscaping. That's the term that's used in the condition of approval. Sufficient landscaping to buffer where it abuts the residential zone.
So currently, the back part of that, there's about 60% of that is open grassland in the property. And of course, sufficient to me is on the, on the front side where, it's the stuff people drive by consistently. We're here to maintain and keep the property really nice. So I would leave it in the existing state, providing it was just a sufficient, because to me, we've got a lot of landscaping currently on the property.
Okay, thank you.
One more question, Rebecca?
Yep, so I was noticing it was really hot today with the asphalt. What do you think about having some dividers in there with some tall, narrow, skinny trees to add vegetation to all that asphalt? Is that just not cool for car dealerships?
The hard thing that I would wonder is how you trench through all the asphalt and disturb everything to run sprinkler lines through to properly to water that. So I don't know that it's real feasible. I do think if it's split down at a future state, then I think a lot of those things could be addressed if we choose to.
And then the other thing is, do you have a vision for what you're going to put next to Wright's? We're just finishing up our South Corridor plan and all that, and so traffic is always a big safety issue along there. And are you visioning it being like a restaurant or more housing, or what are you thinking?
I think if we did housing would definitely be addressed on the backside. On the Shiloh side, I think that makes the most sense. Yeah. We've talked to another family-based local business based out of Kalispell that would possibly go in there on the further south side. So
you don't want to say right now what you might do? Okay.
I don't know that I can speak to that. What are your thoughts? She's asking the kind of business. If we did, it would be a lot less traffic thing than like a typical restaurant, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Brad.
Hi, this is Phil Wolf. Can I speak to that, please?
Go ahead, please.
You may.
Hopefully I've been heard. Thank you, Council. Appreciate your time. This is Phil Wolf. And a couple of things as far as addressing landscaping. In looking at the density of landscaping on Highway 93 side, I think we exceed our partners up and down the street by considerable. If you look at the grass, the shrubbery, it definitely is overgrown, needs to be modernized, needs to be kept up, which we're already in the process of, but to put a burden of additional landscaping on that facility really is defeating to what the type of business it is. If you go to the east side, as Brad just said, it's currently grassland now. If I don't see any purpose of a buffer on that east side, I think we can block traffic other ways, possibly with, some riprap or some type of block, something that's attractive on there to stop the cut, people cutting through there. But I think to be putting additional landscape on there, if that is ever developed, then it gets tore up again with whoever would put up a business down there. And most likely, our future ideas would be for residential, as Brad spoke of there. But the pavement on that side of the facility is going to be reduced from what it was previously for the last 35 or 40 years. We're only planning on utilizing about 3 acres of the 5 acres. So our footprint is definitely going to shrink from what it was in the past. And to put additional landscaping out to cover asphalt, it's been getting hot and cold for, 30, 40, 50 years. So I don't know that today's temperatures are going to vary and change what that has survived in the past. So we just feel like the business is pretty adequate. And with our limited use, I think we can improve the footprint there considerably.
Thanks for your comments. Anything further from the council for Brad or his father? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing. Is there any public comment tonight from the audience on this item? Any public comment? Not seeing any. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council. And let's please start with a motion just to move things along. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the request from Wolf Auto Group for a conditional use permit to operate a car dealership located at 6331 Highway 93 South, Zone WB2, Secondary Business District. That's WCUP 21-10.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Ryan, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would like to add, could I add something?
Sure.
I think we should strike, I would move that we strike condition number 7 in its current form. If we think that there
Let's see if we get a second on that first, Steve. There was a friendly amendment to strike condition number 7 in the staff report that would require a second for discussion.
I'll second for discussion.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Steve.
I don't think it makes very good policy to leave something that says sufficient landscaping because nobody really knows what that is, and what's sufficient to somebody might not be sufficient to somebody else. And if you look at the east side of that property, it does buffer residential, but there's nothing developed on that residential yet. It seems like a 20-foot setback on that side does not make sense either, so I think we're kind of left with making this up on the fly, and I don't really like doing that. So that's why I think we should strike it.
Further comments on the friendly amendment? Frank.
Yeah, Steve, just to give you some background, the concern of the planning board and those that spoke at the time were that the backside of that property is basically asphalt all the way over to Shiloh. And that it is, if you start operating commercial operations on that side of the property, I know that's not their current plan, that the neighborhood and I think we as a city would want that buffered from the residential areas on that side. Now, we can argue about what sufficiency is, and when the planning board discussed it, I don't think we said sufficient. I think we effectively said we were going to require some landscaping to buffer. We didn't describe it, or the planning board did not describe it per se, but I for one will not support the motion to approve unless we replace 7 with something that's more useful and more appropriate, if that's your concern. I think that requiring additional landscaping trees as the buffer might be a helpful thing. That would give them flexibility to add, if they're not going to use it, they could then add their commercial or their other residential type use they might want to use over there without having to disturb those additional trees or the trees that would be there for isolating or buffering the commercial uses, and would be an amenity to the city as well as I said, the residential neighborhoods on that side. And I think maybe we think about sufficiency being additional landscape trees, and how, as the planning or the planning staff to help us put more sufficiency or more description in that so that it's something that they could enforce. But that was the intent of the planning board at the time.
Certainly.
And
yeah.
the other is that we did know, or they did discuss the fact that they thought they would put residential, and I think the planning board's discussion was, okay, well, that's fine. But the idea is that you put a landscape buffer between the commercial uses on that property and the residential, so that if they were going to move forward, the idea would be that the landscape buffer would have to come to the back of the residential development and in front, or to the east side, and the east side of the commercial use. That was the intent of the planning board at the time. Given the current proposal and what we're being asked to consider, I think the appropriate amendment possibly to condition number 7 might be simply adding more or additional landscape trees to add a visual barrier along that street to the current residential uses. Anyway, that's my feeling.
Further comments on the friendly amendment? Rebecca?
Yep, I won't be supporting what you're saying, Steve, because I really think the planning board heard the neighbors, and they really wanted a visual buffer between commercial and their investment property or their home. And if that east side gets developed at some point, we can always move trees and shrubs, you know, but I think we need to actually have a delineated visual buffer. We could do berms, we could have trees, we could make it look like there's a transition period between the heavy commercial use and the residential. And we also have arborists on our staff that are more than willing to help with people's projects too, I'm sure. So I won't be supporting it, but I would like to have some language that defines it more clearly.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I'm
Steve?
I'm open to some other language or some other sort of buffer. I'm not against having some sort of buffering, but the way it's written and the way we would be approving it makes no sense at all to me. I mean, sufficient landscaping doesn't, I don't understand what that means. So how does the property owner know what that means? And how do we know if they've done it sufficiently?
If you support some level of landscape buffering on that east side, Steve, could we keep the condition as number 7 and just, rather than strike the condition, amend the condition? Would that be okay with your motion, or?
Sure, that's fine. I'll withdraw my motion
Okay.
to strike.
That's okay with the second? The motion to amend is withdrawn?
To strike, the motion to strike is withdrawn.
Withdrawn, excuse me.
But I would like to make a motion to amend condition number 7, but I don't know what we say, because we have standards in our zoning code that call for what a buffer is and where it goes, and it feels like we're just kind of making this up because we want to have a buffer there.
Tara or Dave, do you mind coming back up to the podium, please, to address Steve's concerns?
You want to sit here, Dave?
Is this mic on?
Yes.
I mean, one thing I would suggest, I mean, not along Shiloh there's never been city street trees planted, so maybe that's an option where it's a 6-foot wide buffer, and there's standards in the subdivision regulations that provide spacing for street trees. So I was trying to look up, I lost my spot, but planting strip, minimum of 6 feet wide landscape planting strip located between the curb and the sidewalk. And I'm not sure on the spacing of the trees, but we could, let's see here. basically 40 feet on center. And there's, you know, there's some standards for types of trees and spacing. I mean, that might be one suggestion if you're looking for greenery. You know, the B2 does require a 20-foot landscape buffer between commercial uses and residential on the rear of the property. So, I mean, again, that's another option. I don't know if it directly abuts a residential district because there's a street in between, but
David, if I might.
Frank, by all means.
David, you said 40 foot on center?
yeah, that's the subdivision standards for street trees along a street. Now, if there was a subdivision, we'd make them put that in anyway. Say if they were to subdivide that lot and, you know, and designate portions of that for residential apartments or something like that.
Right.
We'd probably have a condition on there that they, you know, provide city street trees along Shiloh.
Okay, and why is it 40 foot on center as opposed to 30 or 20?
That's just what the subdivision standards state. Should be no less than that.
It's just standard for all of our city boulevard trees.
You know, I understand that, but I'm concerned here, since we do have
So, yeah, large trees are 40 feet on center, medium-sized trees 30 feet on center, and small trees 20 feet on center.
okay, and now I'm gonna ask you, how do we decide whether what's planted is a large, small, or medium-sized tree, given that they're all going, no matter what they are, they're gonna be small when they're planted? I know this. We've been to this party before, so help me out here.
It's probably the species, but yeah, I'm
Right,
defer
I
to
got
Maria
it.
on that. But
I think we're getting into the weeds a little bit here, and I think we have a very competent staff that could probably craft or at least review and approve a plan that you know, matches the WB2 requirement of a 20-foot landscape buffer with adequate planting density to obscure or differentiate between the commercial and residential use. I think that would be something we can put back to staff to work on.
I would propose, Mr. Mayor, that we amend condition number 7 to say that something along the lines of they will submit a landscaping plan for the eastern side of the property that is approved by staff that provides adequate buffering for the residential zone.
Perfect. Is there a second to the friendly amendment? And that was seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion on the friendly amendment? We'll vote on the friendly amendment first. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, and it brings us back to our original motion for approval as amended, which is condition number 7 again. Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks very much to the applicants, and thank you, Tara. We'll move on to item 6B of our agenda, which is Resolution 21-22, a resolution discontinuing, abandoning, and vacating an improved public alley located between lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of Block 45 and Lot 1 of South Central Subdivision, and this is on page 77 of your packet. Craig.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'll address the brief staff report, and then myself and Angie will be able to answer questions, whether they be technical in nature or statutory in nature. So the Downtowner LLC and the Whitefish Hotel Group LLC own the properties at 224 Spokane Avenue and 541 East 2nd Street, and are interested in making improvements to their properties and have submitted the enclosed petition to vacate and abandon the alley on the north side of Block 45 in downtown Whitefish. The proximity of the alley to the intersection of Spokane Avenue and East 2nd Streets does tend to increase congestion during the busy summer months when northbound vehicles are waiting to turn left into the alley. Issues are also created when southbound vehicles turning right into the alley must wait for vehicles to exit. The petitioners wish to restrict traffic in the existing alley to convey pedestrians in and around Block 45. Therefore, abandonment of the alley will not only reduce congestion downtown, it will also eliminate pedestrian conflicts with vehicles and service trucks that could occur if the alley were to remain open to traffic. The petitioners are also interested in creating 3 visible fronts for the future structure that is planned on lots 1, 2, and 3 of Block 45. Abandonment of the alley will ensure that all 3 elevations will contribute to the aesthetics of the neighborhood and will not create a back-of-the-house look. Pursuant to Montana Code annotated, the council may discontinue the alley if it can be done without detriment to the public interests upon petition of more than 50% of the owners of the lots on the alley. Since the petitioners do own more than 50% of the lots abutting the alley, this condition is satisfied. Section 7 -14 -4115 of Montana Code annotated provides that the vacation of an alley shall not affect the right of any public entity to continue to maintain, or excuse me, public utility to continue to maintain its plant and equipment. The city does currently own a gravity sewer main in this alley that serves a significant number of homes and businesses and will require future maintenance and replacement by the city. Section 7 of the statute can be satisfied if council conditions the abandonment to require the petitioners to execute an easement, which would be recorded with Flathead County, allowing the city to install, maintain, and replace its public infrastructure. There are no financial requirements or impacts of abandoning the public alley, as future improvements will be paid for by the petitioners. If approved, the vacated property will be placed on the city assessment rolls for the purposes of future taxation. So staff has reviewed this petition and determined it will not be detrimental to the public interest should the easement be conditioned, nor will it restrict access or services to any other properties. Based on this, staff is comfortable with the approval of Resolution 21-22, I believe, vacating and abandoning the alley on the north side of Block 45. So as I mentioned, I'm happy to address Public Works questions, and Angie would be the appropriate staff member for anything related to statute.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions for Craig? And we'll start with Rebecca.
Yep, Craig, we got a comment. Did you read this comment that we got? That is written by someone that owns, it's 209 Central Avenue building. And she says that it's a heavily used alley and that there are safety concerns if two vehicles are going towards each other down the alley and they have to back up onto 3rd Street or 2nd Street. And so that alley is the only way out of that situation. So I just wonder why we're doing this. I assume it's a request because they're going to develop the property and they want this alley as part of their project. Is that the only reason they're asking for this?
Yeah, I think we could probably let the applicant or the applicant's representative address that, but I will tell you this is one of, I believe, only 2 T alleys that we have downtown. All of the other downtown businesses have a single alley that fronts their businesses, and you know, for years, service trucks, including UPS and deliveries, have managed to maintain service. I'm not sure that, in my opinion, that this T alley is necessary for proper ingress and egress for the buildings on Central Avenue or the buildings to the south, you know, that are on Spokane Avenue. I can understand why a property owner may think that to be the case, but I don't know that I necessarily agree.
Have we done any studies to show how that alley is used, or are we just going with what we think is happening?
I don't know that I'd quantify it as an official study, but I've witnessed on numerous occasions traffic being backed up for vehicles waiting to turn left and right into the alley. And I think any place where we can prevent those vehicle conflicts with pedestrians, it's in our best interest to try and eliminate them.
So you're mostly worried about pedestrian issues on this alley?
I'm worried about pedestrian issues and traffic congestion.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for staff? Ben?
So Craig, there's a sewer main in that alley, right? That's
Correct.
So no building's ever gonna get built in the alley?
We would definitely want to condition any approval on an easement that would prevent any structures be placed on top of the sewer main, correct?
What would be the practical difference between an abandonment like this versus simply putting a sign that says no traffic if we were so inclined to do so. Or no driving through, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, I think you'd have to do more than probably just put a sign in. You'd likely have to extend the curb across and do some other improvements to prevent or more effectively deter vehicles from using the alley. You know, but signage is obviously a possibility and would be part of that plan.
And I'd also add that if it's abandoned, the property itself actually goes to the adjacent property owners. It's no longer city. So, I mean, that's, I guess, the other difference.
It's no longer city?
No.
Correct.
And I was also a little confused about the 3 visible fronts piece of this, or how it affects the architecture of any future projects. Can anybody explain that, or is that an applicant question?
Yeah, I think it's probably an applicant question.
Frank?
Wandering into the weeds again. I think, Craig, if I read the report right, that they are going to obligate themselves to maintain that as a pedestrian, effectively right-of-way, a sidewalk, or other pedestrian use. Is that correct?
Correct. I believe their intention is to allow pedestrians and bicyclists to get, you know, in and around the block and prevent vehicles from using that alley.
Okay.
Of course, you know, should there be maintenance required on the sanitary sewer main, then of course we'd have service equipment, but the intention would be to prevent public vehicle use.
Okay, and so effectively, the easement that we would be given back is what, the same width and length that the alley is currently? Is that correct?
We would want, correct, yes. We'd want the easement to encompass the existing alley width.
Okay, and that's part of this, as proposed?
As proposed, or as recommended by staff, we would want council to condition this approval on an easement approved by staff.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Rebecca?
Is it possible to turn that other alley into a both direction alley, not just one way, if we go ahead with this?
The alley is currently two direction. The north-south alley is currently two direction.
I mean, the alley that's south of the downtowner, that is one way, could that be reversed to have both ways? Or is it, do we decide that, or does someone else decide that?
There isn't currently an alley on the south side of the downtowner. That's all private property.
Oh,
I know
that's
that there's
private
parking
property.
in that area, and there is likely through access from Highway 93 to that north-south alley, but it's not city-owned or maintained.
I see, thank you.
Further questions? Steve?
So I'm a little confused about abandoning an area where we have a sewer main. Have we ever abandoned right-of-way where there's a sewer main before?
I know that we have abandoned and vacated other rights-of-way. I don't know that they're necessarily alleys, but there's been similar circumstances where we've abandoned a right-of-way upon condition of having an easement for the existing utility.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Further questions? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on Resolution 21-22. I believe the applicant's representative is present. I'll ask, I guess it's Will, to speak on behalf of the applicant, then we'll open it up to general public comment. Will.
Will McDonald, 180 Fauna Road. The big thing is pedestrian safety and traffic flow. That's the reason why we're looking at this, and we have no desire to encroach on the current street. The idea would be to do, maybe it's improved some sort of cobblestone. What we want to do is try and create a streetscape experience. We've thought about, or again, we haven't even gone into design yet from schematic standpoint for lots 1, 2, and 3. But what we've, what you see in streets in London, Georgetown, other urban areas is maybe a bollard on both the east and west side of that access point. Once we take, if the council does approve this abandonment, it would essentially function and operate just like a regular alleyway from optic standpoint. But we would have bollards there, to your point, I don't know if it was Steve or Ben, that said, you know, a sign. And so it would look, for all intents and purposes, like a normal alleyway, so that if the city did need to get to the sewer main, we obviously understand that you're going to need to access that the bollards can easily be removed, appropriate trucks can come in. Again, it's when you look at other towns, mountain towns like Denver or whatever, it's, you know, what we're thinking is having retail and on that first floor, and for maybe even the downtowner, if it's improved to where people can just walk out onto the street, there could be maybe, you know, an art gala, some type of, you know, theme like that is what we're thinking. With the 3 frontage, a lot of the times when you have back of the way alleyway, it doesn't create a really optically a nice frontage to a hotel or some sort of retail experience. And so again, if we do have that alleyway, we'll be sort of controlling traffic flow, and we can easily divert to that downtowner side. We're also potentially evaluating parking garage or a subsurface for lots 1, 2, and 3. So we'll be looking at that as well. So again, trying to control traffic flow to make sure that pedestrians can move around there. So again, I'm up here also to answer questions if the council has any.
Thanks, Will. Any questions for the applicant? Ben?
I think you briefly touched on this, but just to make sure I understand fully, is the design of the building that you're going to put there going to be different based on whether or not that?
I think it's, you know, in talking with the owners, it's when you have that alleyway there, it just creates a different type of flow of traffic. We don't really want traffic flowing right there. It's more creating that street experience with the pedestrian. So we, you know, we had this conversation is how do you articulate that? And so it's just sort of, you know, creating sort of 3 fronts and more sort of controlling pedestrian flow around it and really making it kind of like a warm place that you can come up to versus trying to jump out of the way of some car that's trying to go through the alleyway so that they can get to the traffic and don't have to wait at the light at 2nd Street. Because we obviously see people who get creative with their driving tactics during the summertime.
Yeah, I've been stuck in that alley before. It's terrible. If the city were to close that alley to vehicular traffic, if we were to decide to do so, would that achieve the same objective for you?
I'd have to, I mean, it's looking at what we want to try and do there from an improvement standpoint and then Zero's lot line and potential setbacks there. I mean, if the city council did not go with this and abandon it, we would want to try and figure out a best case scenario. What we want to do is improve it because it is pretty gnarly. I don't know if you've driven back there. I mean, it's potholed. It's pretty ugly, and it's not going to be high on the city's list of improvements. You guys are looking at other roads prior to that. The usage is, what we want to do is improve it. And so we can't really improve it unless we're in control of it.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca?
So when the firebrand went in, all of that parking right next to that was supposed to be for employee parking, and that never went through. There was no agreement reached. But are you planning to use the area north of this alley for parking?
No, there's no, if we go vertical on lots 1, 2, and 3, the only, I believe, economical way to make that happen would be some sort of subsurface parking. But again, this is, I wasn't a part of the firebrand, so I can't really speak to that. I do know that what we're talking about right now is the alleyway, and we would certainly structure an easement with the city that would protect your rights for the sewer main.
Okay, so when you say go vertical, you mean you're going to build something up on?
Yes, construct some sort of structure. I mean, what we're looking at and design, and again, that would be done through the building department. If it's greater than 7,500 square feet, we'd have to come back through a CUP. But what we're thinking and envisioning is retail on the first floor, commercial, or not commercial, sorry, but some sort of restaurant that really sort of extends the street experience along 2nd Street. And then looking at potentially doing some sort of hotel that is connected to the firebrand. That's sort of the thought right now, but we haven't even gone into full design. It's more sort of high-level thought. And so this abandonment of the alleyway is the critical component that really goes into design before we really start putting money into it. So we wanted to first address this issue.
I see, thank you.
Further questions for the applicant? Andy?
So just one quick question. Well, I'm assuming that the alley would probably remain open until something happened on lots 1, 2, and 3. Otherwise, egress and ingress out of the existing parking there would be a little tricky, yeah?
Yes, sir. That seems very practical to me, and that would easily be a condition, that we would completely support.
Okay.
Further questions? Thanks, Will.
Yep, thank you.
We did advertise for a public hearing. We've heard from the applicant. Are there any public comments from the audience? Dave?
Dave Kaufman, 217 Central Avenue. My property is directly to the west of that alleyway. And I was unaware of any of this until I got the notice in the mail at the tail end of last week, so I feel like I'm a little late to the party. But anyhow, my concern or my interest is that the documentation showed that the phone company was not interested in participating in this. And as a adjacent property owner, I would be interested in the portion of that alley that's directly behind their building. And my interest would be for a parking spot, a single parking spot, to service. I've got 2 apartments upstairs. Parking's at a huge premium downtown Whitefish, and it doesn't seem to be contrary to anything I've heard so far tonight, that if this is being deeded over to them, I'm almost a contiguous property, and I would be interested in participating for a parking spot there. So had lots 4 and 5, the phone company there, been interested in that, obviously it would have excluded me. But since they are not, that piqued my interest, and so here I am asking to be included in part of the planning process. I do think that what Will spoke to as a streetscape, or being able to have more of a street experience and a cosmetically more enjoyable experience down there, I think that's a great idea to enhance that. I've owned that building where I'm at it's been in the family for probably 35 years. I'm really familiar with that alley and that intersection, and I don't think there would be a downside to closing that off eventually and making that a pedestrian area. So my suggestion would be, just if I was going to put a parking space in, it would just be directly behind the phone company there. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
You bet. Further comments from the public? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or a motion. I have a question, if you guys don't mind. Craig, in the event that the city were to abandon this right away and the development group is now the new owner, and we have a sewer line under the improvements that they've paid for, and we need to replace the sewer line at some point down the road, who pays for the replacement of the improvements that were paid for by the developer? Would that be on the city or the developer, or the owner, I should say?
Typically, our easement documents indicate that we return the surface to the condition we found it. So if they do, a cobblestone surface of some sort, it would likely be us. But I would think we could fashion the language of the easement to simply involve, backfill and compaction or something like that.
How deep's the sewer line in that location?
I think it's about 8 feet deep.
So when you excavate for that sewer line and over-excavate for the new line, what's the width of the disturbance roughly?
Yeah, the sewer is
full width of the alley?
It's about 10 and a half feet, and so in order to get that deep, yeah, we're we're probably talking about a 20-foot.
So basically, all the improvements would be removed.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion.
Andy?
I would make a motion that we approve resolution number 21-22, which is a resolution discontinuing, abandoning, and vacating an improved public alley located between lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of Block 45 and Lot 1 of South Central Subdivision.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Andy, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just a couple of thoughts. Getting back to Craig's comment first about protecting our rights to maintain our utilities there. I think, Angie, correct me if I'm wrong, the second whereas pretty well covers that, doesn't it, in the resolution?
Yeah, it does under state law, Andy. I just would feel more comfortable with an actual written easement document.
Okay. And then I guess just on the alley as a whole, quite frankly, I don't think that alley functions today. I just happened to go to Rap and Roll the other day and parked in that parking lot, and I watched other people come out of that parking lot, and the way people access that alley is by driving down the sidewalk pretty much, and then they turn out onto Spokane. And I think we have to remember, if we look at it today with the parking lot there, that's one thing, but we have to understand that something, whether we abandon it or not, is going to get built on lots 1, 2, and 3. And given what the setbacks are in the WB3 zone, we're going to find out that that's going to go right to the edge of the alley, and it's going to go right to the edge of the sidewalk on both the east and the north side. And the line of sight coming out of that alley to make either a left or a right turn, or to try and turn into it, quite frankly, once a building gets built there, would be pathetic. I mean, it would be it's dangerous as it is now, given the traffic volumes that we see at that corner. So I think long-term, we have to look at it like that alley is going to function even less than it functions today, which is not very well. So I don't really have any problem with it. So.
Further comments from the council? Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm going to vote against it. I think you made really good points, Andy, though, about the safety of it. But I think the other, the way that the other longer alley functions, we need outlets to that. I just don't have a good feeling about it. I don't know why. I am very excited about the project, though. It sounds like it'll really enhance that corner. We will be losing a lot of parking, but I think it sounds like it will be lovely once it's done. But I'll be voting no. I just have a strong feeling that something bad might happen, but I don't know why.
Thanks, Rebecca. Frank?
As much as a question as anything else. Craig, the portion of what I'll call the north half, the portion of that alleyway that abuts lots 4 and 5, when we abandon it, who owns that section of the alley?
I can answer that, actually, Frank. It will be the lots 4 and 5 on and then the downtowner. So the ownership just reverts to the adjacent property owners.
Okay, so the telephone company, which is on 4 and 5, would then become the owner of that half of the alleyway.
Correct.
And they can do with it what they will.
Correct.
Include sell it to somebody for a parking place.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further comments? Ben?
I am also going to vote against this motion, and I would just state why. I agree with all the concerns about the alley. I know that alley is very tricky to get through. But I think that the city giving away community property is tricky business, as we've seen tonight with other adjacent landowners like Mr. Kaufman, who may also want a piece of it, I guess. I do think that if pedestrian safety is the issue, it could potentially be solved a different way, and that would be by the city closing the alley. And I would feel better if it was approached in that manner, and perhaps if the applicant came to the city with a proposal for something like that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Further comments? Steve?
Just a quick one. I'm a little torn. I agree with Ben. I think that it's really the city's responsibility to look out for pedestrian safety, not necessarily the property owners having to be granted an abandonment in order for us to do that. At the same time, I do think that the field that they're going for would be a really nice, it would be a nice amenity for the public in that area. And I would hope that it would remain open to the public in that capacity. I do question, since they don't own lots 4 and 5, what will happen on the end of 4 and 5, because maybe if they own that property now, who knows what they're going to do with it. So I'm going to vote for it, but I have my reservations.
Further comments? I have just a few. I certainly understand the concerns with the existing condition of the alley, and I also understand the intent of the concepts that we've heard tonight, but I think this is a bit premature, and I don't take it very lightly when we're basically donating public land to a private developer, even though I can understand it could be a good opportunity for a good public-private partnership that improves the downtown and addresses current deficiencies. However, we've heard tonight concepts about a parking garage, bollards, cobblestone walkway, the look and feel of Denver or London, this facility connecting to the Firebrand, and in my opinion, it would be nice to understand how this would fit into that larger context before simply donating public land to private development. So I'm not opposed to this concept, but I think it's certainly premature. And when you look at the value of land in the downtown, I would hate to understand what the value of that piece of property is, and it's probably significant. It's the highest value real estate we have in the entire city. So with that said, are there further comments on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And the motion does fail unanimously. Thank you very much. You guys want to take a quick break or keep pushing? Let's go. Agreed. We will move on to item 6C of the agenda, which is resolution 21-23, a resolution establishing an increase in the public skate and ice skate fee schedule. Maria, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, I am recommending that you adopt a proposed fee schedule for public skate and ice skate rentals at the Stumptown Ice Den. In November of 2015, the city did enter into an agreement, the management agreement with the Whitefish Sports Facility Foundation to manage the ice den, and that agreement established rates for ice time, including public skate and skate rentals. It also required that all rate adjustments for public use be approved by the City Council. For the fee for public skate and other ice times has not increased since 2017, though their operational costs have increased. Currently, the fee for public skate is $7 and the fee for a skate rental is $3. And Whitefish Sports Facility Foundation is requesting the option to increase to a maximum fee for public skate to be $10 and a maximum fee for skate rental to be $5. They did research in rinks in Montana as well as regional, and those are included in my staff report for your review. You may notice that the proposed increase would exceed other Montana communities, but it is important that we note that most other rinks limit public skate from 1 to 2 hours, while our public skate is typically 2 to 3 hours. Additionally, the Whitefish Sports Facility Foundation is requesting the rate increase specifically just for high demand periods such as peak season, weekends, and holidays. They will continue to offer discounted admission rates consistent with current rate structure. Their proposed fee schedule is March through October, all seasons. It would remain the same as it currently is, as well as November through February. On weekdays, special events, and promotions, it would remain the same as it currently is. However, November through February, on weekends and holidays, the increase would be $10 for the admission and $5 for the skate rental. The park board did unanimously recommend approval of this during their June meeting. There is no financial requirement to implement this fee schedule. And I can answer any questions, as well as Greg Harms, who is here to represent the Whitefish Sports Facility Foundation.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for attending. Any questions for Maria on her staff report? Rebecca?
Is it absolutely necessary to increase fees?
The proposal is to help them offset the operational costs for managing the facility, as their costs have increased in the past 4 years.
Okay, so there is a budgetary reason for doing so?
That's
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Steve?
Yeah. My question, Maria, is do we have any information about where people come from that use the ice den?
I would actually defer to Greg on that, because since the city has managed it, I think that demographic has changed significantly.
Okay.
Hi, Greg.
Greg Harms, 117 Vista Drive, Whitefish. So our demographic has changed a lot, especially during the holiday periods. I don't have numbers in front of me. I didn't prepare that, but I'd say probably 60 to 70% are from out of town during holiday weekends and that kind of thing. Most of our local skaters will come, during programs, the Learn to Skate programs, the hockey programs, that kind of thing. People do come in, but oftentimes they'll avoid the busiest times, which are the weekends and holidays, just because it is so busy.
Well, the reason I asked the question is that, there's so few perks to living here full-time. And it seems like if you have a student ID from the school, or if you're an adult and you have a driver's license with a Whitefish address, that maybe, or even a Kalispell address, that maybe you get the regular rates, and the increased rates only apply to people who aren't local. Mm-hmm. Just a thought.
Further questions for Maria or Dave? Greg, excuse me. Not seeing any. Thanks.
Okay. All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Greg. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6C, which is resolution 21-23. Are there any public comments tonight on this item? Sir.
Giuseppe Caltabiano, 2075 Lion Mountain Loop Road, Whitefish. I think that where Councilman Steve Connell was going is a very good argument. I think we residents live and pay and enjoy 365 days a year the beauty of our town. We have tourists who come in. I lived around the world, and it's very normal for non-residents to pay a premium to enjoy the facilities that all of us pay for all year round. So I would invite Council to consider a plan of differentiation between residents and non-residents that honor the residents. And this is a good example where you could put 3 times the fee, and I'll tell you, people from California will pay 3 times the fee to enjoy the ice rink, while our kids who live here, we pay taxes here, should be protected and honored by paying the local fees. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. Further comment this evening? Go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or a motion. Of course.
Maria, how hard would it be to change the fee, or how hard would it be to change the fee schedule to include something like that instead of just raising it indiscriminately?
We could accomplish that. It would have to be a point of sale decision, and yeah, we could do that.
Okay. You think that was...
So part of what Public Skate does, it helps us keep the costs down for the organized programs like the Learn to Skate, Learn to Play Hockey programs, and that kind of thing. We kind of have a 4-legged stool for our income streams, and the public side is one of those. And we really took a huge hit on that this last year. And Giuseppe, you're correct. People from out of town laugh at how inexpensive it is to come either for public skating or to come here to rent ice during the summer. to, bring hockey camps here and that kind of thing. So I try and keep the cost down as much as possible for our regular users, which are all local residents, and this would kind of help offset that. And I just want the ability to do this, so during peak periods, we can charge a little bit more.
Would you object to us if I made a motion to postpone this discussion, could you come back in 2 weeks with a little revised fee schedule that included something for a delineation between residents and non-residents?
Yeah.
Is that necessary?
I don't think it's necessary personally, and
Okay.
does the city council want to get into
Not really.
this level of management of the ice rink?
No,
So,
probably not.
I've always used my best judgment on that and have done a really good job at keeping costs down and expenses down and our fees down for everybody, especially local residents.
All right. I trust you. I hope it doesn't come across that I don't.
It is a public facility, though, and this is our one ability to help locals, so I think your comment's appropriate. Maria?
We could achieve it simply by adding one line that says November through February resident rate is still $7 for admission and $3 for skate rental. We have resident and non-resident rate fees for our summer camp programs, and that has already been established. The precedent has been set for what that means, and that is within the school district area.
Frank?
And Greg, going to this point, I think you see where we're going with this, I guess, and I know you appreciate our concern for our local skaters and how we best adjust to them. At the same time, we as locals are very concerned about making sure that the ice den is successful, financially and otherwise. If we were to make this change, have you a sense of the impact on your budgets or your income streams that it would make in any kind of, can you manage it that way, or has it become more difficult in terms of your ability to manage your budgets?
We could do it, and I would have to run it for a season and see the outcome.
Okay.
Sure.
Steve?
I will make a motion to approve Resolution 21 dash, is this 23? 23.
22, excuse me.
Oh, sorry. I thought 22 was the alley one.
It failed.
Oh, it failed. Okay, 21-22. A resolution establishing an increase in the public skate and ice skate fee schedule with, well, I guess I need a second before I can amend it.
Seconded by Councilor Norton.
Okay.
Steve?
And I would like to make a friendly amendment to add a line to the chart on, what page is this? Page 88 of the packet, in the middle row, that November through February, there is a, well, whatever Maria said earlier.
A resident fee.
Okay, that the resident fee stays $7 and $3.
That is a formal friendly amendment. Is there a second to that friendly amendment?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Norton. I heard her first. Frank, any comments on the amendment? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the friendly amendment does pass. Ben, did you have a comment? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you for working with us on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, thanks, guys.
I hear nothing but great things about how the rink's being operated, so very much appreciated. Yep. That brings us back to the original motion as amended. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
This next one's rather wordy, but I think for the record, I should probably read it. I'll go back to my agenda here. We'll move on to item 6D of the agenda, which is Resolution 21-23, a resolution submitting to the qualified electors of the city of Whitefish, Montana, the question of whether to approve the existing 3% resort tax for an additional 20-year term, thereby extending the expiration date to January 31st, 2045, with the resulting resort tax revenues to be used starting February 1, 2025 as follows. 1, 25% for property tax relief. 2, 58% for the repair, maintenance, and improvement of streets, storm sewers, all underground utilities, sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. 3, 10% for improvements and maintenance of bicycle and pedestrian paths and other park acquisitions, improvements, and equipment. 4, 2% for the maintenance and replacement of existing improvements of the Whitefish Trail, with any amounts not expended within 5 fiscal years available for the maintenance of city bicycle and pedestrian paths. And 5% for merchants' cost and administration. And I'll turn it over to Dana for her staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. In the packet, you have my staff reports. We have been talking about this topic for some time now, going back to our most recent public hearing in January 19th, where we discussed with the public the current ballot language that is in front of you. Our resort tax is set to expire in 2025. Therefore, we are looking at extending our resort tax. We are looking at doing it this fall municipal election. There's reasons for that. One, that it doesn't cost us any more since we'll be already holding an election. But it also gives us the opportunity to hold a second election in 2023 should the ballot measure fail, and we can go back to the drawing board to again rethink what the uses might be, term, etc. So that's been the plan since before I was appointed city manager, and actually even before I became the finance director. So it's been planned for some time. We also have talked about the uses, and John's read them already for everybody. The most significant change is the addition of some specific language. Property tax relief is staying the same at 25%. Streets, improvements of streets, stormwater, sewers, the utilities, again with those streets, is 58%. Before that, it's been 65% of 2%. So it sounds like it's a decrease, but it is not. In fact, streets would actually get around $600,000 more a year just with our estimated resort tax today. And we anticipate that to grow as we see resort tax grow year over year. We also have included the words maintenance for streets. Oftentimes we see potholes that show up, and in the past resort tax has only been allowed to be used for improvements of streets. So a simple overlay which improves the driving quality, many would notice, wouldn't actually qualify for resort tax. So by adding that terminology in there, we're able to now use this on streets that might just need to be overlaid. Again, we have the bike paths and pedestrian paths and bike paths within city limits, the parks as well, where we improve parks with playground equipment, other facilities, gazebos, etc. Right now, it's 5% that goes to parks, but it's 5% of 2%. We're increasing that to 10% in this proposed ballot language, as we know that we've needed to complete a backlog of maintenance on our bicycle paths within town. And we have added a few key words, again, maintenance being one of them, as well as park acquisitions. So as we look at needing open space in Whitefish for parks, this could be utilized for the purchase of open space for a park. We also have now 2% that is included for the maintenance and replacement of existing improvements of the Whitefish Trail. And again, we wanted to make it very specific to existing improvements and that we are just maintaining what is built. We are not going to be adding to the trail or completing the loop with these funds. There was a specific caveat on here where we do have that if the funds were not expended within 5 fiscal years, that it could be used on city bicycle paths. Again, very similar uses, but resort tax should be used within a reasonable amount of time. We're collecting from our visitors. We should be continuing to utilize those funds. Unlike other funds at the city where we should have a capital reserve of 25%, resort tax is different. We want to see those funds being used. And then there's always the 5% that is held for merchants and their cost of administration. This is often like the 3% fee that they pay for a credit card and the time it takes them to submit their reports, those kind of things. And I know that that's been helpful. So again, I think overall this language is drafted to be the ballot language. I did receive some comments before this public hearing, and I'm sure Heidi will touch on it a little bit, but there could be some language added to the actual ballot language to maybe clarify, like, you know, why are we doing this? So I have drafted just a brief introduction maybe to the ballot language that makes it read a little bit better. And I'll just, so what that would read is in the section 2 of the resolution, you could amend it to read, to continue property tax relief, maintain and improve streets and utilities infrastructure, and improve and maintain parks, trails, and close to home recreation infrastructure, shall the existing 3% resort tax be extended for, and then it goes on for that very long paragraph. But what it does is in the beginning, it just kind of, you know, prefaces it of what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to continue the property tax relief and then be able to fund these projects. It's a minor amendment. Again, I'll leave that up to you guys if that's something you want to consider or not. So basically at this point, we have to have the language to the city, to the county election administrator by August 9th so that it would be included on the November 2nd ballot. Once that if approved tonight to move forward, we will send the resolution to the county. We will have to send or publish notice about the items that are taxable for the voters, and there is some specific publishing requirements for that, although none of the taxable items are proposed to change with this ballot language. So with that said, staff does recommend that the City Council hold the public hearing and consider the proposed resolution that would submit to the qualified electors of the City of Whitefish the question of whether the resort tax should be extended with the updated uses from the resulting revenues. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dana. Questions for Dana? We'll start with Rebecca and then Steve.
Yep. So the question I hear most about this is, well, we got letters about it, is why are we paying resort tax money for the trail system, which is outside Whitefish, the jurisdiction of Whitefish? And so would you just explain that to the public, so, because it is upsetting to people because they feel like the original intention was strictly within our jurisdiction. And the second one is the open space procurement. Do we have any way of guesstimating how much money that might generate for buying raw land that could be turned into community open space too? Thanks, Dana.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll start off with the question about the Whitefish Trail. So the Whitefish Trail obviously is outside city limits, but it began, between the city of Whitefish, worked with Whitefish Legacy Partners, and Michael Gogan started it with a significant donation to get the project started. And Heidi is here to answer questions that I might screw up on this whole history part, but as time has gone on, it's been funded through philanthropy, and they do rely on a lot of donations and fundraising activities to support not only the continued development of the trail to close the loop, but also to maintain the trail. The city does not financially contribute to the Whitefish Trail at this time, other than through some in-kind services through our expertise of our directors, and so right now, there is no true city financial commitment to the trail. That said, I think that it's pretty well known that the trail does bring in a significant amount of visitation and thus results in additional resort tax revenues that are collected. And in the future, should the Whitefish Trail maintenance ever revert to the city, this would be the funding source to have the city maintain it. We don't want to have to look at any other type of property tax increase, and it makes sense that a trail that attracts visitors and puts burden on the city would thus be paid for through the resort tax. So I I think that, Heidi will be able to touch on that a little bit more at the public hearing part, but through the work sessions and through discussions with city council and the public, they decided that, this time to add 2%. Now, 2% isn't a lot. We're talking about $4 million in resort tax revenue, and 2% is roughly $100,000 a year. So pretty minor when you look at where all the other funding is going. For your second question on open space, so, right now we obviously have a backlog of our bike ped, our bicycle paths in town. The park board does have priorities for what they want to see done in parks and what they want to do for expanding the trail systems. But with 10% versus the 5%, we will actually see a total annual revenue of about $450,000 that could go to parks improvements, bike path maintenance, and all of that. So not a lot of money when you think about land costs in Whitefish, but it's something. And so, again, it would be a priority that's recommended by the park board and the resort tax committee, but then obviously the council has the full authority whether or not to use resort tax on certain projects. Yep.
Thanks, Dana. Further questions for Dana? Steve?
This one I think is more for Maria. We're spending all that money, the 10% on parks currently? Or, I mean, I guess this is an increase for parks, but.
But we are basically splitting it between bike paths and park improvements.
Okay. Are we looking for vacant land to buy for more open space?
That is not currently on the priority list at this time.
Okay. And then this one's for you, Dana. Other than cost, is there anything that prevents us from running the election in 2022 or 2024?
So I wouldn't recommend 2024 because I think that's a little too close. To be able to have the election in November and then get the ordinance in effect by January 31st for 2025, I think the 2024 election is too late. 2023 would be our drop dead election. Other than that, it is just simply cost.
How much does it cost to have a ballot?
$10,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I guess that would also depend, if you're doing it during a municipal election or not. So when we're doing our municipal election and we're $8,000 to $10,000 right now, resort tax isn't adding anything on top of it. It would be like if we do it in 2022, then it would be the additional $10,000.
That's the one that, yeah, so.
23 is okay, 21 is okay, 22 would be a special election.
With $10,000?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Steve. Further questions? Ben?
I just had one question. It was about the 5% administrative cost. Is that the right amount? How much is that exactly?
So, I'd have to look back and see how much, so the vendors are keeping that. We don't actually see that. I can calculate what it is. But I would say it's not far off. When we look at what our costs to have a merchant processing company for credit cards, they range anywhere from 3% to maybe 5% if you're using higher end cards. So, the time that it takes, depending on the business, the accounting software should be able to hopefully pop out that information quickly. It's a very simple form to submit. I have not heard complaints that it's not enough. And then when we have had complaints about credit card fees and we remind them that you're keeping 5% of what you collect for us, they're like, oh, right, that's fine, totally understand it. And so I think that it's fine. We have not to my knowledge, I've heard complaints about it not being enough, or too much, I guess.
Okay.
Have you heard any?
Thanks, Ben. Anything further? We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6D of our agenda, which is resolution 21-23, and we'll hold that public hearing now, and I'll address Jim first since you've stayed since public comment at the beginning of the meeting. Okay. Giuseppe, I saw your hand. Okay. Draw straws.
Do I need to reintroduce myself? Or
yes, please.
Giuseppe Caltabiano, 2075 Lion Mountain Loop Road, Whitefish, Montana. I'm also partner in a business called Next-Gen Payment Services in Spokane Avenue, where the Pine Lodge Plaza is. I didn't mean to talk about credit cards, but we might need to. First of all, I wanted to applaud the council because as a property owner, my mill levy to my property have dropped in the last 4 years. And Whitefish is one of the least expensive towns in Montana. I saw your data, cheaper than Paulson and Laurel to own property in, but not to live in. And here comes the point. As a Montana resident, we are subjected to a burden that if I were a Florida resident, could be as high as 10% more to live in Montana. And that's a choice, you know, income taxes and other taxes to live here. There are people who live 6 months and 1 day outside of Montana, and they still enjoy the benefits of being in Whitefish without paying that up to 10% burden and 3% after tax money, 365 days a year into this community. So when we pay a resort tax, we local residents are paying 3% after we have been taxed. This is not pre-tax money. This resort tax, my invitation to the council is this. This is a long-term renewal. Long-term renewals should come with studies, which I hear you've done, that are part of a master plan and consider future growth. None of us could have guessed the growth we've had in the last, after COVID year. Where I come to is that we are at risk of doing the same thing to the residents that we might be doing if we increase the fees of the ice skating ring the same across the board. The tourists come here, enjoy our town, pay the resort tax, and live. We suffer the same traffic, but the tourists don't perceive it as traffic because they come from Chicago and they don't think this is traffic. We suffer that traffic. We pay the 3%, and we don't see much benefit if we live here without owning property. So my invitation to the council is there a way to, while we extend the 3% burden, decouple the decision on the earmarking, for lack of a better word, of that amount of money? I'll give you an example. Have we studied how many renters live in Whitefish who do not own property, who are not benefiting of the rebate of the resort tax? We property owners do benefit, and I'm happy for that, but if I were a renter, I don't think my property owner would rebate back to me, discounting my rent, because they pay less in property taxes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Finally, on the merchant fees, Visa and MasterCard have changed their regulations the last 2 years because of COVID to allow merchants to turn around the merchant fees to the card holders. So that would wipe out the argument about we as a city controlling money, income, so that they can afford the merchant fees. I rest my case.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Jeff? Excuse me, Jim.
Just to be clear, Mr. Mayor, I've got 5 or 6 minutes. If I don't need to feel super rushed.
Take your time.
Okay. You know, speaking of how the verbiage reads on the ballot, which is what your city manager was referring to, and what Councilman Fury remembers, that we basically bought the boat to get this thing passed in the first place by proposing the 25% property tax reduction fee. Otherwise, it never would have happened. When they came in, they looked at the ballot and they said, okay, the main reason we wanted to do it in the first place is that the streets were just intolerable. We just couldn't, small Volkswagens would get lost in potholes. And it was really, really bad. So we said we had to do it. So a voter came in and he read that, and he says, okay, you're going to fix my streets, and you're going to reduce my property taxes, and somebody else is going to pay for it. My idea of a fair tax is when somebody else pays. So that's why it passed. Now, going back to talking about a place for the people who, Frank's people that live here, Andy knows, people have been here forever, know that they like to stay here. They're the renters. For example, I don't think I would vote for it if I was a renter, but if there were local people here who want to stay here, who deserve to stay here, but are getting totally pushed out of the home, partially due to things that you as a council have done. Fixing the town up so pretty and so nice and so sweet, you know, that it probably exacerbated the process for the huge influx of tourists. We all knew some point in time that whitefish was going to get discovered, and it did, and it blew up, and here we are. But I guess there's no real rush and real fire to run to here for getting this on the ballot, from what I understand. So maybe we take a pause and say, let's think outside of the box a little bit, because basically this is the third shot at the cannon, isn't it? Out of the cannon of it's basically the same thing we proposed in the beginning. We fix the streets, we lower the property taxes, we give 5% to bike paths, which I think is pretty specific as how it was at that time. Maybe it is a time to say, okay, we know, which was a stroke of genius, getting that Haskell Basin thing and raising the conservation easement or whatever that is. I've been out of politic things so long I've forgotten terms and phrases and catchwords or buzzwords, but now maybe it is a time, because that's going to get paid off, it looks like, in 2025, which is a thing of beauty. So that's an excess amount of money. And then I'm not seeing or hearing any talk about budgeting for the growth. I mean, we're spending more money on streets than we thought we were even going to be able to collect. So there's an appreciation factor here as when you're budgeting in a business, and you look at the revenue, and the revenue is going to drive the tax, and it's going to be up and it's going to be big. So I'm just saying, be bold, be the first one to go out there and pay a premium for a piece of property. We've had this town of Whitefish got so many good deals on property. When we got that property out there behind Safeway, virtually cost the city of Whitefish $50,000 for all that acreage up in there. You've had some good turns. Now it's time to step up, and if you want to buy votes on the ballot, tell them you're going to do something about the people who want, the young people or who want to live here, who want to raise their families here, and it's a whole nother kettle of fish. I mean, it's going to be hard to navigate through those waters. Everybody's going to have an idea who gets to live there and whatever, who gets a piece of that pie. But I don't know. I just, even though I'm not here so much now, I still love Whitefish, and part of it breaks my heart, and then that part of it I'm proud of. So it's sort of makes you sick and it makes you happy at the same time. So that's all I got to say about that.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate the comments. Thanks for sticking around. Heidi.
Hello, Council. Hello, Mayor. Heidi Van Everen, Whitefish Legacy Partners, and I live at 4 Pine Avenue in Whitefish. I want to commend you all and thank you for considering the resort tax renewal. I think it's great that we're getting ahead of things, and I think I'm thankful for all the success we've had in the past with the resort tax, that as he was referencing, the success years ago and the success with Haskell Basin, and I'm glad that we're pursuing it again and getting ahead of the game here to make sure that we're successful as a community. I do believe that the 3% to support maintenance and improvements is critical to our community, and I, of course, greatly appreciate that you're thinking about the Whitefish Trail, specifically in addition to the bike paths that we have around. I just think it's important that we think ahead about maintenance and how we manage that, and I don't think there's many communities that are thinking in the way that you all are, and it's something that we can be proud of. And to address your question, Steve, about the Whitefish Trail, or maybe it was Ben, I apologize, but just being outside, or I guess it was Rebecca, that's what it was over on that side. Just being outside, I think, it really is, the Whitefish Trail is a huge income generator for this community, and so we appreciate that we're actually recognizing that and embracing it, and then thinking, out as far as 2045, because that's not an easy task, but you all are doing it, and so thank you for that. I think that's it.
Thanks, Heidi. It's
Yep.
good to see you.
Nice to be here.
Been a while. Further public comment tonight on this item? Go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or a motion. Actually, why don't we just take a quick break for about 6 minutes and we'll reconvene at about 9:05. That's classic. Yeah, no, I wish. You do. We're going to go ahead and get started. Folks don't mind taking their seats. So we are reconvened. We just closed the public hearing on item 6D, and I'll turn it back to the council for discussion. Steve.
Before we have a motion, I just want to say that conditions on the ground have changed since January 19th when we last looked at the resort tax allocation. And I can't support it in the current form without any money going towards affordable housing at this point. I don't think we can, I know that we have to try to keep it clean because we want the voters to not have to think about too many things. But the number one issue from people that I talk to in town is what are we doing to help people stay here and come here and live here? And we're in a crisis situation. Whatever the bill was that ended our Legacy Homes program wasn't passed last time we talked about this. And we just never had any discussion about it. So moving forward without even trying to carve out some money for affordable housing, I can't in good conscience at this point move forward with the current allocation. So that's my starting point.
Thanks, Steve. Frank.
A question, Dana. Is there, in terms of our timing of approving this, are we up against a hard and fast deadline here to get it on the ballot for 2021?
So simply, August 9th is the deadline for the 2021 ballot.
Okay.
It is up to council if you want to forego this election cycle. We've just always intended to have it at least to the voters this year. But we could pay for an election in 2022. You could look in pushing it to 2023. But again, if it fails in 2023, we might not have resort tax ever again. And that's the biggest concern, is that if it does not renew or extend, we will not be eligible anymore. So that's my only concern waiting to 2023.
Yeah,
But
no, I was thinking,
yeah.
okay, where are we in terms of process for putting it on the ballot for 2021? I don't want to
Okay.
miss that opportunity for sure. You're telling us August 9th is the deadline day.
Yep.
If we don't pass this in some form or fashion this evening, there's no time for lack of a better description, a work session or another public hearing on changing this allocation.
Well, we have 2 city council meetings before the 9th. Let us pull up the work session information. You want me to grab it? I can do it. Oh, no, you don't worry, because you got all the stuff going on there. Okay. Let us see about the work sessions between those dates. We would at a minimum have to hold the public hearing on the 2nd of August, because the 9th is the following Monday. But that is our meeting is the 2nd of August, so that would be the drop dead date. So you'd probably want a work session on the 19th. But I do know we have work sessions. I'm just not sure what we can bump. So let's see.
I think another important consideration is that this draft ballot language was vetted by the Resort Tax Monitoring Committee. And I think if we were to make any substantive changes to the language, I think it would be the courteous thing to do to bring it back to the Resort Tax Monitoring Committee. Failure to do so, I think, would jeopardize the whole process.
So looking at the next 2 work sessions, the next one is going to be on the 90-day requirement for STRs and the annexation policy. And then the next one is a climate action plan and marijuana storefront discussion. So 2 really important items. We could potentially push them back or push the 90-day short-term rental to August, 2nd meeting in August maybe. But again, that's also a hot topic right now too. So it's really hard to want to push any of those things back. Oh. Yeah.
Steve, we only get really one shot at this for the next 20 years, right?
When we have a shot this
Right, well, I
coming
mean-
election, and then you have to pay in 2022, then you have another shot in 2023, and yes.
Right. I mean, we have essentially three election cycles where we can do this. So we have if we can't get it done by this 9th this year, it would go to 2022. It costs $10,000, which is really not that much in our budget to hold an election on this. I just feel like we got to get it right. I mean, if it goes through without anything for affordable housing this time, we can't change it until 2045, right? I just don't.
Andy.
Here's my thoughts. I agree that affordable housing is probably a logical source of some of the resort tax funds. Obviously, a big chunk of the problem that we're seeing being created in the housing market is by people coming here and buying second homes. It's visitors to this community. I agree with that 100%. But what I also agree with is the fact that we generate a heck of a lot of revenue out of that thing that, were we to fail, would be an even bigger burden on this community than not including housing at this point. Now, the other thing to consider is we have an affordable housing problem today. This is not going to generate any additional revenue for this community for 4 years. 4 years from now. So we're going to put our horses in front of that cart and hope that things work out, and then maybe we don't, and people say, oh, I really don't want to pay for affordable housing on my resort tax, and then we fail, then ultimately we could have a huge problem. So kind of what my thought is, and it was certainly the resort tax committee, and I may be living in the past a little bit because I went to the mat hard, and I understand what the original arguments in opposition to this tax were. Understand them very, very well. And I think a lot of that, particularly from the people that are going to actually go out and vote for this, are probably still there. What we're doing with it currently makes very little change from what we initially promised, and I think that's kind of always been our thing with this tax. It's like the biggest argument you always hear, well, Washington, they had 1%, and then now it's like 10%, and they spend it everywhere. Well, once we start doing that, then that argument starts floating back to the surface again. We already heard Kevin Gartland in here the other day saying, well, the chamber unanimously voted to take a look at the list of taxable items. If we go that far down the rabbit hole right now, I'm not saying housing is necessarily going to take us there, but I think it has the potential to do that. So here's kind of my thought. We vote now, we approve, we know we're guaranteed till 2045. We can go back out and vote anytime we want in that period. We could go back out in 2026, we could go back out in 2027, we could go back out in 2028, when we actually have a hard and fast plan for housing that we could offer the voters and say, look, this is what we got now. Do you want to approve it? We did the exact thing with Haskell. That was in midstream, in a vote. We went back to the voters and said, we're going to amend, we're going to revote this thing, and we're going to add 1%, we're going to do Haskell. And they said, yeah. And I think, quite frankly, you'd almost stand a better chance at that point when we come out with a fully baked plan and we say, this is what it is, we're going to rechange the allocation of funding and we're going to include affordable housing for it, and you go out and you campaign to vote that thing specifically for that. And then we could go for another 20 years after that, or we could just go out to the 2045. We're still in at that point. If we were going to generate money tomorrow to fix the housing problem, I would say, yeah, that's a great idea. I would support it, because I do support it. I just don't know that right now is the time to try and do that. And I mean, I understand from a philosophical standpoint, yeah, and I understand possibly from a sales standpoint, it may be a good one too. But then when people's like, well, gee, I'm not going to get anything for 4 years, and and then they're going to say, wow, we voted that thing in and nothing changed, right? We're still an affordable housing program, and they lied to us. And even though we're going to be able to go out and tell them, it's like, hey, look, guys, no, we're not going to do that. The public typically doesn't hear that side of it. So, and I think one of the things in staying true to the tax is we've always had very defined expenditures, defined places that money would go and how it was used, with a committee of citizens that decided on the ultimate projects that got up to our desk and then we ultimately approved via staff. So I think I hear where you're coming from 1,000%, but I just don't know that right now is the time to try and step back and make that happen. I think we put our place marker in there, and we know that at least the other part of it that is benefiting us hugely is secure till 2045. We may fail with this, I don't know. People may go, well, they didn't put anything in there for housing. And if we hear that, then we can come back. But I would hate to lose the opportunity, like, well, 2022, we're still arguing about what we're gonna tax and how much the housing program's gonna cost and who's gonna benefit. And then, I mean, you know how long it takes to do stuff. It took us 2 years to get the legacy housing program together. If we fall back to the committee level to try and put the program together, we may run out of time. And then if we run out of time, we're toast. We're done at that point. So that's my argument for. I mean, and I don't know if it's a good one, but it's one that I've made in my head and I'm sticking to it. So there you go.
Further comments from the council? Rebecca?
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment, and I agree with Andy's timeline, and we will be dealing with the housing crisis with other venues, other ways of dealing with it, because we can't wait 4 years. It's an immediate crisis right now, and we have a lot of creative ways to deal with it. So, and I like the potential, if we need to go back to the voters later, but I'm comfortable with passing this through as is tonight. It's a little cumbersome, but I think most of it is maintenance and property tax relief. And we, with the amount of people that are coming here, we really need to have mechanisms for that. I also really like it that we're having park acquisitions potentially on board, so we can, instead of like doing a bond for open space, that we have some way of getting funds stored away so that if we have matching funds coming through or more opportunities to keep Whitefish special, I think that's really nice. But I'm glad you guys care so much about our recent crisis. I mean, streets were really terrible when I moved here almost, 25 years ago. And then the water was a really big issue, and now we're dealing with housing. And so there's always something that's going to be the big hot item that people are paying most attention to. And so luckily this resort tax has dealt with streets and dealt with water, and we will deal with housing too, but maybe not through this way of dealing with the taxation.
Frank?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to...
Can I have one comment, please, before you do make a motion?
Okay.
I appreciated Dana's additional language that she provided tonight. It's very similar to what we did with the Get Out the Vote for Water campaign for Haskell Basin, those introductory sentences that just kind of boil down exactly what this means in layman's terms, and I appreciate the language, and I would encourage the council to incorporate that in the revised, or the new ballot language. Frank, apologies for
Mr. Mayor.
interrupting.
No, you did perfectly. I would like to move to approve Resolution 2123, a resolution of submitting to the qualified electors of the city of Whitefish, Montana, the question of whether to approve the existing 3% resort tax for an additional 20-year term, with including the proposed language that Dana provided for us earlier as part and parcel of that motion.
Great, thanks, Frank. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion?
Yes.
Frank?
Couple things. Giuseppe, I appreciate the renters not necessarily believing that they're benefiting with the property tax rebate. They are. They do. They use the sewers, they use the streets, and in fact, their rent is probably not as high as it might otherwise be as a result of the property tax rebate. So they do benefit greatly, and because of the other things that it does for them and for the city. But I appreciate that, and I appreciate the invitation to talk to them about that and to encourage them to support this. I couldn't agree more with Andy's sentiments as to why we need to pass this and we need to move forward on it in its current form. And Steve, I understand your concerns. I also believe, and I'm going to solicit you right now, I hope that you can support this under the circumstances at this time. I think it's important this entire council support us going forward on this thing. I just think it's really important that we do that. And I'm trying to put you on the spot, but I'm trying to invite you in. So with that said, that's my motion.
Thanks, Frank. Further discussion? Ben?
I think the resort tax has done a lot of really good things in our community. I mean, I think the residents here benefit substantially from it. I think the Whitefish Trail system, even though it might not be directly in city limits, also conveys significant benefit to the citizens of Whitefish. And I think that getting this passed and getting this renewed for another 20 years is exactly what our community needs for our kids down the road, and to have nice streets and to have a town that we like to live in. So I do believe that passing this is paramount. I will also agree with Councilor Quinnell that this is probably a very good source for funding for affordable housing, but I really struggle with the fact that we don't exactly have a plan of how that fund is going to get used. And I think it's hard to do that. So my thought is I'm going to support moving forward with this tonight. I know we've got some discussions coming about the ARPA funds and other short-term funds that we have. Personally, I would like to start there. Let's see if we can use some of that for housing, and then if that works well, we can evaluate it for a long-term funding source from the resort tax or something like that. So, ready to move forward?
Thanks, Ben. Further comments? All those in favor of the, Steve?
I just want to, Frank, I will indulge you and vote for this over some reservations, and I just want to make them clear. It's not that I don't support the resort tax, and I know what it does for me because I look at my property tax bill twice a year, and it helps. And with that said, you know, the reason we have a resort tax so that we could kind of tell the voters of Whitefish what our values are. What are the things that we value? We value taking a tax and giving relief to the people that live here. We also fix our streets and roads and our infrastructure. Those things are easy to me to see. Those are clearly our values. I value the Whitefish Trail. I'm on it all the time. I'm not 100% sure that that we need to take 2% of what we're getting and send it out there over an idea like affordable housing. But I agree that as long as this is not a set in stone allocation, then yeah, it makes sense to move forward, and we can, once we get a plan in place, then we can go back to the voters and say, okay, this is what we're going to do to change the allocation here. And because that's what we value, and that's what we've been saying since 1996 at least, that we need to be able to help support families to live here. Families like mine. So I will indulge you, Frank, and support this.
Thank you, Steve. Further comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, same sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Thank you very much, Dana, and for the public comment tonight. And we'll move on to item 7 of our agenda. You have Dana's written report and close with the packet. Any questions for Dana on her report? Ben?
This isn't directly related to the report, but I was wondering if it could be responded to if a response for the comment received about noise in certain hours, if anybody knows anything about that.
Yeah, so I'm obviously, Chief Dial might be able to talk about it more, but you know, in looking at our city code, obviously we have a disturbing the peace that could apply to excessively loud noises. It's often difficult when dealing with businesses on, you know, who do you cite in those situations. But, you know, we could look into billings. We have had, I would say, you know, noise complaints aren't common, but we definitely do receive them occasionally. But if Chief Dial has more information, you know, I think, you know, right now our code is pretty silent. It doesn't have a decibel reading like Billings does.
We've definitely addressed this many times over the years, whether or not to go with the decibel, you know, reading for both commercial and residential noise. It's come up with the lodge. It came up when Casey's put the top deck on. It's come up with, you know, Craggy Range when they have outdoor music. So it's certainly been addressed before. And I think we've always elected not to go with a decibel metering because who's going to go out and measure? That's the bottom line. But I'm certainly not opposed to reevaluating it.
Well, one thing I would just say is that the outdoor music at the Tap House is new this year. It's only been going on for a couple, I mean, they've had events there in the past, but having it continuously is new this year. And so I think, in knowing Ed, I think he would work with the neighborhood if the complaints come to him and he can talk with them about it. I think that he would do that.
Rebecca?
I would like us to look at it because we are surrounded by water and noise really travels in our town. And I think if we could quantify it some way and just make it more livable here, I'd like to know what's out there and how we would control that and educate people about what's possible. I just think we're going to have more activity in town as we keep growing, and so I'd like it to be addressed. I live over by the footbridge, but I can hear people talking on downtown. Like I can actually hear people speaking, and I can also hear distinct words in Riverside Park, and I can hear all the church bells, which I don't mind. But I just think it would be nice to know how a city does that, so that we don't really become like uncomfortable to live in.
Any additional questions on Dana's report or comments? Dana, anything additional to report on?
I just wanted to share with you that the Public Works Department is going to move forward with applying not only for our minimum allocation grant, which, let me backtrack. House Bill 632 allocated the American Rescue Plan funds that the state received. This is not our direct allocation from Treasury that did go through the state, but they received funds specific for the response to the pandemic. Within that, they've identified 2 different grant opportunities for water and sewer and broadband improvements. The first is the minimum allocation grant program. Basically, they've looked at each city, determined what that allocation should be. We're at $1.4 million. The required match is $530,000, which is based on our direct allocation actually, or a 1-to-1 match, whichever is less. So the $530,000 would be our match. We're going to apply for that, and then you can use those funds and match the competitive grant application as well. We found out recently from MDT that they might have found some funds to overlay Spokane from 2nd to 13th. Obviously that area of the road is very poor right now. In fact, with resort tax, it's probably the #1 project that people reference that our resort tax isn't doing anything when it's not even our right of way to maintain. But MDT does sound like they might have found some funds to overlay it, because while we are working on the downtown highway study that would look at traffic there and reconstructing that road, you're out 5 to 7 years maybe to get it all the way through construction, and I think there's fears that that road itself isn't going to last that long in its current state. So the good news is we have some serious water main under there that needs to be replaced. That's also partly, you'll see a lot of patches on that road. We've had to access it due to leaks. Craig brought forward the idea to apply for the grant for that project that would replace our cast iron water mains. We have currently in the fiscal year 22 budget $1 million for cast iron water main replacement. So the $530,000 match is already included in the budget. So there would be no cost for us being able to match it. It wouldn't then touch our ARPA funds that we've received that we've talked about using for housing. So we're moving forward with that. We're hopeful that the competitive grant could also pull in additional funds, but we will have that direct allocation of 1.4 million, minimum allocation of 1.4 million just by requesting those funds with the match. So we're hopeful that that will actually help. It gets our water main replaced where it's bad, MDT comes and overlays it, and it gets us through the next 5 to 7 years as we wait for that downtown highway study to complete its process. So really great news there. That's all I have though for tonight.
Thanks, Dana. We will start with councilor comments. Rebecca, would you like to start tonight?
I attended and Heidi was there, a housewarming for a disabled veteran. And it was really an amazing event, one of the most moving things I've done. He's a paraplegic, and the house was mortgage-free for the whole family. It's not in our jurisdiction, it's in Whitefish Hills in the new subdivision there. But it was many companies donated to make that happen, and they do that all across the country. So there's family in the area is why they chose Whitefish, but it was very moving. So I'm really happy that they're here.
Thanks, Rebecca. Great news indeed. Steve, anything tonight? Thanks. Ben? Ryan?
Nothing for me.
Thank you, Ryan. Andy?
I guess just one quick 4th of July comment. Everything seemed to do pretty well, but for the most part, I don't think anybody read the new fireworks ordinance based on the number of things I saw in the sky all night. Mostly by my neighbors, of course. You know, I didn't really want to go over to inform them. It's like, that stuff's all illegal now. But so I think maybe next year before the 4th, if we don't do away with the darn things 100%, that we would want to have a little preparatory course in the newsletter that comes out and say, look, these are the only legal fireworks in the city of Whitefish. Because Chief, you probably know better than I, but Chief, that it was all the same. I mean, I didn't see any difference. And I had kind of hung my hat on, and I sort of tried to promise Rebecca that it was going to be better in the text, and that didn't happen. So I have to go back on my word, and I feel really bad about that. But oh, good, good. They were running the rank. We had some, but not as many as that. I think the new ordinance. Oh, good, I stand corrected.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Frank?
And as long as we're on the subject, I was going to say that I thought it was better this year, particularly on the 3rd. It was like, wow, I didn't have any problems, and even on the 4th, it didn't start as early, and it didn't seem to go quite as late. So actually, my experience was, it was a little better. So there you go. Thanks.
Likewise. I have nothing further. Dana, anything further from staff? We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.